Hi.
Hi there.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
What's happening?
Being on tour.
How's that going?
It's pretty good.
You like it, yeah? Mm-hmm. Congrats on the record.
Thank you.
As you get to certain stages in your career and your life, do you find you have more or less to say?
I always have a little too much to say, I'm sure. Yeah.
And trying to edit through that and make a record, what's that process like for you? Because you've done a whole bunch now.
The editing what you want to say isn't hard. The editing the sounds is the hard part.
Like the songs?
Yeah, just getting it to a point where you realize, okay, it's done. That sounds right there. You may not know exactly how to describe what it is that you want to hear, but when it gets there, you kind of know. Or you end up somewhere else that you feel is exciting.
How did it start on this album? Like, what were the first sounds or thoughts or words you had?
Oracle of the Maritimes was the first song I had for this record, so it kind of started there.
We'll play that.
Okay.
All right. We'll definitely play that. What was it about that? Like, if there's people listening to us right now, let's say they're 13, 14, 15 years old, they want to be songwriters. Mm-hmm. They hear this finished product. How did that song start for you?
Literally just writing a poem on a piece of scratch paper. It's really that simple. I always use a lot of time and a lot of different sounds, but it could be as simple as writing a poem on a piece of paper, really.
Do you have like cannons in your house, just books after books and paper after paper?
Those all burned up in the fire.
They all went.
Probably luckily, so I don't have to go through all that again.
People joke a lot. Some people, you've heard people, I'm sure, joke. You said, "Oh man, if everything's burned down, I would just lose my stuff and I'd be fine." But you went through it. It's not a lovely experience.
No, but the stuff, it is nice to think that, logically you understand, well, it's only stuff, so that's not a big deal. And then it happens and you realize, oh, okay, I really did feel that way. It's a relief.
It is.
Because it sounds really weird and self-serving, but what if you do end up with some sort of strange depression based on owning things or being overly sentimental about pictures or something like that?
So for the backstory for people listening, were you mixing in Sweden when your house burned down? And what happened? I
had a really, really, really old barn, part of which was built in the 1700s and the rest of it built at other weird times. And it was just really old and it was fairly rotten and it was an electrical thing. That's what the fire marshal said.
And so you got a call saying...
It's a very common Vermont occurrence. Barns fall over first, or they're torn down, or they burn down, usually.
I was once told that the barns fall over or they lose their hold because there's no life in them anymore, and that usually cows or horses would be exhaling and it keeps it up. But once the place is empty, the barn just has a natural life cycle and decides, I've served my purpose.
Well, that's a sweet way to think about it, but I don't think that the cows necessarily want to live in there anyway.
Exactly.
It's a structural problem.
Right. And so you got the word that did you panic?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I felt really helpless at the same time. I also had to go in survival mode because I was speaking to my boyfriend who was there at the time, and he was beside himself and going through a really horrible traumatic experience. So my feelings were pretty secondary, and it was about comforting him. It wasn't about me freaking out. But definitely deep inside, I was panicking my ass off, I'm sure.
And so it's like that Low album, Things We Lost in the Fire. Have you focused much on that? Or you said it is a bit liberating?
Well, yeah, it is a bit, because you can, like I said, you can tell yourself all you want, like, well, if I didn't have this stuff, it wouldn't matter. It's just about who is in your life, so it really doesn't matter. Things, and a lot of things are things I kept because I figure, well, I'll make something out of that. I don't want to waste it. which, you start to blur the line between hoarder and recycler, which, is a very real thing. So not that the ecological disaster of all those things burning at the same time is good, but in the aftermath, you can't take it back, so you got to make the best of it you can.
Absolutely. This particular record, when did you know it was done?
I went through so many different stages and revisions with Lasse Mjorten, who is the mix engineer I worked with in Sweden, and he and I were kind of doing it remotely because the record was pushed back a bit due to the fire. Mm-hmm. And so he and I would do it via email. And so that probably made it take a little longer, but you just kind of know.
Did it?
That's the worst answer.
No, it's not.
But it really is the truth.
Yeah, and I mean, the truth is the best answer. And if people don't like it, that's on them. But what I wonder is when you look back at it, did you see a theme? Did you have a plan? Did you honor that plan, or did something else happen?
I honored the plan of trusting myself and being very present and enjoying it.
Is that a common situation for you?
Yeah, it used to be. And then I lost that a bit. And then, a bunch of years of being kind of depressed and dealing with that. And then, then coming back out of depressed years, making a record with Katie and Laura, and doing a lot of things that involved giving up control of things. People who are workaholic control freaks tend to be very controlling, and I'm one of those people, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not that healthy. So, the going through that with Katie and Laura and relinquishing control, and that was so much fun, and the touring for that record was so much fun. I came out of that feeling really good, and then the New Pornographers put out a record, and we toured that, and it was such a great experience. And then I think what really drove it home was I attended the first ever women's producer conference in the history of humanity or the earth, which was held in Brooklyn, New York, I think around 2016. And it was put on by these two women, Killah Marichich and Melissa Dine, who were in a band called The Blow. Mm-hmm. And they're engineers and producers as well. And they had been doing a lot of research. And so they decided it was time. And on a shoestring budget, they put together a woman producer. And they got women from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, and from all different age groups. And it was probably the greatest day, culmination, whatever you want to call it, of my entire career. That must be, you don't even win anything. You just go there and you talk to these other women about what they do. And the only way I can describe it is I wonder if that's how people feel when they win an Oscar for Best Picture or something.
Oh, like that.
Like the validation of seeing these other women of different ages and backgrounds talking about something that I do every day and barely acknowledge to myself.
So take us in the room. Is it a conference hall? Do you walk into a place? Do you go, oh, hey, that's so-and-so, or hey, that's so-and-so? What was it like?
I don't remember the name of the actual venue. Yeah. It's still up online, so it's easy to find. But there was 6 of us, and we all were sharing the same green room because, like I said, it was a tiny budget. And so, I'm usually pretty shy and polite when I first meet people. And, knowing a little more about these women now, I know that they're the same way. So when we all got in the room, we just exploded into conversation. We were starving for dialogue with other women about producing, about the technical side, the emotional side, the hilarious side. We were dying for it. And it was
Is it the kind of thing you knew you were missing it, or you didn't realize?
I didn't realize how bad. It was, you can logically know representation matters and remember times in your life when it mattered, but it's a really weird meta feeling to be the representation and to see the representation in front of a mixed audience of men, women, non-gendered people, whatever, and be talking about your profession.
Who were you there with?
I was there with Miho Hattori from Chibomato, Nika from Zola Jesus. There was Killah and Melissa from The Blow, and Susie Analog as well. And we were freaking out in a good way.
What's the takeaway from that? What do you do next? Season 2?
Make more music. And for the actual event of Woman Producer, I really hope they do it again. People should be giving them money to host these events all over the world. It was so major and so important.
They should do one here in this house. But they can, let's do like a boutique salon version of it here in the house. Yeah. And invite students in for free and let them just come watch it.
Yeah, I mean, these women are so smart and empathetic and hilarious, and it would be amazing.
What did you learn technically? Like, what did you learn about being an artist?
Technically, I got really interested in Ableton because every single woman there was like, Ableton.
Yeah, like when they're wizards at it, and when someone's a wizard at Ableton, it's like you're in a whole other universe now.
Yeah, and then, Matt Chamberlain, who I worked with on the record, is really, like, I met a whole lot of other people who are really into it, so I'm like, okay, because Pro Tools and we don't really get along, but I'm a super ADD person who needs everything in front of me. I can't have hidden menus.
Yeah.
If menus are hidden, it's really hard. It's just, I'm too ADD for that. Like, I remember being in school and getting into algebra. No. And loving algebra. And I could do it and I felt so cool. But when the problem got longer than a certain length, I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep track of it. And so I just had to accept, well, it makes me too mad to make it worth my while. So, I basically, I use it, but I hire really good people to do it.
Right. Well, this is, I think, one of the key things that people know, or they're knowing now. It hasn't been widely acknowledged, but people just learn differently. So not everybody learns the exact same way. And in the arts, it would be the same thing. And to be creative, to be a musician, there can't just be one way to lay a track and one way to lay a drum, and that's it. Like, music and art would be better the more we acknowledge that people are just really unique and fucking cool in the way they learn.
Yeah, it's true. And, I think you and I probably are in that spot in the Gen X situation where I went to school at Emily Carr in Vancouver, and I loved it. And every single technology I studied was dead within 2 years. So I'm really good at like developing photos in the darkroom still, right. I think, but nobody does it anymore. So I'm like, crap.
Can you do it while speaking Latin, another dead language that they teach in schools?
I don't know. I don't think so. But I do love Latin.
It's a beautiful language.
And I cannot speak it, but man, there's some interesting things going on in there.
I like it on the crests. You just read it, and I spend half my time, if I'm traveling in old cities, just Googling, what does that mean? Uh-huh. And what inspired somebody.
It's all white guys first. White guys first. White guy just just translate it to white guys first, and you probably have it.
The Me Too conversation hasn't really gone into music the way I thought it might have.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that.
Did you think it was going to?
I figured it probably would, but I think if we all remember the Kesha Dr. Luke situation, why are people going to come forward? And like basically the court said that he basically owned what she does and her career. Right. Even after he raped her. And that is par for the course in our world. And
I guess music.
Like I could say it's disgusting and horrible, but we already know it is. We're just not doing a fucking thing about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and music is different than the movie business, right? Movie business isn't controlled by three people in the way that the music business kind of is.
It kind of is, and I hope people speak out. I don't know. And I think also survivors, some of the only control they have over what happened to them is to tell their story or to not. Yeah. Sometimes that piece of control they are not willing to relinquish, and we just have to respect that.
Yeah.
But, I definitely have dealt with some horrible people that I haven't been silent with about how they've treated other people. And I definitely don't keep my mouth shut about, oh, so-and-so is an abuser. Like,
has it affected your career?
Don't hire him. No. I'm kind of an outlier, so it doesn't really affect me. But, I mean, not that it couldn't. It could at any time, sure. Right. But I don't care.
That's a really nice place to be in, isn't it? The not caring?
It is a really nice place to be. I don't care, and I care so hard that it's
well, you don't
weird.
Care about the things you ought not to care about, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right?
I've always been a loudmouth, and it's not a very popular spot, so maybe I've just been too loud, and abusers have kept clear of me. I don't know.
Well, I think in your whole career, too, just from the outside, experience it, covering it, just enjoying it, you just kind of do your thing, and it's never seemed to hold you back. I think people buy into you as just for who you are.
I hope so, which is really nice, and I would love to take credit for that, but, if I had been signed by a major label when I was 26 years old or whatever, I would have done it. I would have done it because I really thought that was the way to get your music to people. And I really thought that it was going to be a source of financial security. I did believe all the myths.
About major label life?
Yeah. I did. And, not being signed by a major label in the end was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Because I had to learn how to do all the things. The booking, looking for licenses.
What was that like, making those calls? Like, how did you do that?
I don't know. I just was such a American aggressive kid, I guess. I don't know.
Well, this is the thing with the American dream, right? It's bullshit unless you get lucky and you figure it out.
Well, there's this thing that, we're brought up with, which is tell the truth, ask for what you want. But it's like this weird thing that we're actually saying, keep it to yourself. Don't make waves. Like that's kind of the sub message. But I didn't get the sub message because I'm not very subtle. I'm just kind of a ham fist.
But what happened? Like, how did you, is it simply your brain chemistry? Or was it conditional? Did you have people around you who said, Neko, you can do this?
Well, I think moving to Vancouver to go to school was a really big deal. And, I came from a place in Tacoma, Washington, where my friends and I realized we definitely were the underdog. And, people hated our town. People talked shit about us all the time. And we were scummy and poor, and nobody was going to let us forget it. So you kind of have nothing to lose. But I don't know. And, moving to Vancouver, going to school gave me a lot of confidence. And, of course, playing with Toby and Karina in Mao, we were all major feminists. I don't think we would have called it that at the time. We knew we could do just as good as anybody else. So we kind of overstepped with every ask. It was kind of a little more forceful. The younger who are listening now might not realize just how much has changed in 20 years, even 15 years. So much.
Like to even the idea that, although in the 90s there were lots of bands that were feminist bands, and so a lot of even the big male bands were as well. So there was a different kind of era, and then it sort of devolved into where we are now, which is the 80s again. Except hip hop is just doing what hair metal used to do. So we're kind of back in that cycle. But at that time, did you feel like something was changing? Did you feel like there was progression?
I realized it was changing only because we were going to make it. We were going to force it. And, that's exactly how I thought of it. I was not subtle. Mm-hmm. I wasn't openly a dick to people about it unless they, decided that something we were doing wasn't worth a 2-sentence mention in the upcoming calendar of the arts section, or I don't know,
right. Which would have happened.
It was. Or, somebody sitting in the front row, like just looking up somebody's skirt, like that kind of stuff. We weren't putting up with that. And Karina and Toby weren't putting up with it either. And
who were you I wonder what the inspiration was. Had you read something? I know it's a whole bunch of factors, but who were you reading? What were you listening to? What made you see the path forward?
That was prehistoric human will.
Yeah, it was your lizard brain just going?
It was lizard brain. It was, my desire is huge, and there's nothing about my desire that wants to prey on other people or hurt other people. And there's no reason I shouldn't be able to. And since I'm kind of thought of as kind of a useless girl, like I have nothing to lose here if I stand up. It just doesn't...
You felt that people thought of you that way? Or just generally society?
Just generally in society,
yeah.
You know, and I grew up that way too. So, I don't know, at a certain point, there's a part of you and your humanity that lights up, and I'm sure a culmination of all the music and things I had read throughout my life made me just reject all of that thinking.
I saw Patti Smith last night in New York. She did this event where she read from her book, Just Kids, told some stories, extrapolated, played some songs, and she talked about, especially with Fred Sonic Smith, the power of the common mind. What happens when you're with people and you desire the same things the same way and you have the same core values, how powerful that was. When did you first find have you found something like that? I don't mean in love and relationship. I mean like art.
Yeah, there are people out there who do operate that way that I have been, you know, involved with creatively or just as friends or colleagues or whatever. I think the things start in really small conversations or seemingly small that you hear out the side of your ear that aren't directed at you. For example, I used to hang out in this rock club in Tacoma, Washington called Community World Theater, and it was run by my friend Jim May. And at the time I was about 15 and 16, 17, and you know, Jim was older than me. He was about 28, and his friends were all around 28, 30. And, you know, he knew a lot of women that he worked with and a lot of men. And all of these people had a common goal, and they loved art and music, and they wanted to bring it to Tacoma, our little underdog town. And these people were not there to exploit kids. They were there trying to bring in music. And sometimes kids like me would come around, and they would just kind of create a safe space for us to hang out. And I would hear them talking to each other. And I would hear them, you know, arguing with other people. And I would just, you know, it was so rare that a band would come through with like a woman in it. Mm-hmm. Because it was kind of a very macho time in punk rock that was all like political spew. And, you know, people were very adamant about women being shitty at rock and how we couldn't rock and stuff. And Jim would book bands with women in them and bands that were all women, and he would openly talk about how fucking awesome they were and be dancing in the front row, this huge 6'2" dude, you know. And those were the kind of impressions that really meant the most to me, I think. And I think those are the things that really stuck and added up over time to like an inner skeleton that I could use.
Any of those bands come through? Would people have heard them? Who were the ones that impacted you?
There weren't a lot that people heard outside the region, most likely, except for eventually later there was, oh God, there were so many. I remember seeing a band called The Obituaries. They were really good from Portland, and the Fastbacks would play a lot. And the Fastbacks, to me, were even more incredible because the women played the guitars in the band and sang. And then the men also did it too. You know, it was a group effort. It wasn't one person doing one thing with an assigned role. Everybody was capable of every part.
That does leave a mark on you, doesn't it?
It does. It was so huge. And, you know, the other night we were playing in Minneapolis, and my friend Tao from Tao and the Get Down, Stay Down, she's performing solo on our tour. So she came in and she's playing solo. She has like 5 guitars and she does all this really amazing stuff. And then, our band has 3 female guitar players in it. And I realized it would have taken me, I'm like, it would have taken me a year to see this many women play music when I was 16 years old in the punk rock scene of the Pacific Northwest. And that's a very specific thing, I realize, but
it's supposedly progressive, right?
Yeah, exactly. And talking to people all over the country and all over, the United States and Canada, like they feel the same way. And, later on we'd get like Babes in Toyland come through and they were more well-known and L7 was more well-known and stuff. So it did kind of loosen up. And then, of course, the whole Riot Grrrl movement happened in Olympia and it was really necessary. And some people think it was really obnoxious, but nobody was listening to people say it politely for a really fucking long time. So, kudos to them for that. We owe them.
And I think we do. And I also think that when people thought it was obnoxious, I know from my group of friends because we would have been about 20 when that happened, we didn't even listen to those guys. Like the people who didn't get it or who summarily dismissed it based on gender, there was a whole crew who just went, oh, fuck off. So you could see a real shift happening, even in our own musical community, because it just didn't. You just knew who was behind it, like who's yesterday's man, which is the greatest way to insult somebody is just say you're yesterday's man. Now, do you pay attention to that now?
I mean, there are women who thought that too.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
I'm sure I was one of them at certain points because I was jealous I wasn't in a band. And it wasn't even about what they were saying. It was just the fact that they were in a band, and I'd be like,
so what made you
how
do it then?
good can they be? And it's like, that's when you realice you're just a fucking dick and you need to be making music.
That's right. That's not a gender thing. That's just being a dick.
Yeah, and it's a really important thing to admit to yourself. It's important to just go, oh my God, I totally fell for it, and here I am.
Yeah.
Like, and the second you realize that, your world opens and becomes this fucking in color Wizard of Oz 3D.
Do you remember
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory land?
Do you remember when you had that moment?
Probably living in Tacoma when I was younger. I think I started out my feminism as being kind of thinking things that women did were stupid. And I kind of blamed it on women at first. And it took me a while to go, wait a minute, that's a scam. What? I totally fell for that shit. I did. But, I was a little kid and I didn't have any parents. I didn't have anybody to go, yeah, that's really misguided.
Right.
Or you kind of got to figure things out by yourself doing really dumb shit.
That's where Jim comes into play for you, though.
Exactly.
Right.
Or people just going, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. And then you go, oh, it's a really important thing to realize.
And so are you that person now?
No.
I mean, are you the person who says to other people, hey, that's the wrong way to see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At times, definitely.
Who's the band out of Tacoma that you thought could have broke and never did? Whenever we talk to people from different communities, I'm always curious, but who's the almosts that were amazing?
I think Tacoma's self-esteem might be so not low, but different. I don't think I ever thought about it that way. I thought about it in terms of what bands meant a lot to me.
Yeah, in hindsight.
And, Girl Trouble definitely was the band that meant a lot to me, partly because the drummer was a woman, and I'm sure she had a lot to do with me changing my stupid mind about things like, that whole jealousy thing. Like, she was the drummer, and she was really cool. She was a lot older than me, and I don't know, like every stereotype about who is allowed to rock was not allowed.
I've talked about this on our show before, and people may not remember, but it was more than it was outside in, because I used to work for a rock station, and we were told, like a big one that played female artists, and the unwritten rule from the management was you never played back-to-back female vocals rock. And it wasn't because these guys didn't think women could rock. They just said the audience doesn't want it. And we remember a couple of us speaking and going, what do you mean the audience doesn't want it? Because I can listen to Aretha 900 hours in a row. So what do you mean the audience doesn't want it? They never had a good enough answer. We didn't have the language to know how to wrestle our bosses out of that thinking. We were young too. But we just kept asking questions. We're like, we don't understand. They also didn't want to play metal. So we're like, you don't think chicks can be back to back and you don't want to play metal. So I don't really understand. It's just arbitrary. So, but there were these outside pressures that were feeding why you would think that stuff.
Yeah, and it's weird. It's like somebody decided along the way and made this sound bite that people could pass on, or they did have the numbers at the time, so they thought. I always was really struck by how insulting it was to the audience, because the audience likes music and aren't going to turn it off because suddenly there's a woman's voice, or people are going to turn the radio station for a lot of reasons, but that's not one of them.
And I would even go, if they were going to turn off for that reason, then kind of fuck them and do it anyway, because you can change attitudes over time. And when you're a broadcaster, you sort of have the responsibility to sometimes let your audience know you've got to come forward with us. Yeah.
And, I've been here for 30 years and I've seen the math of that exact thing you're talking about. And the representation mattering is why, I remember being at Coachella a few years ago, and I went to go see Haim, and I was standing on the side of the stage, and I looked out at thousands and thousands of kids, boys, girls, everybody totally jumping up and down, rocking out to Haim. And I was like, it's so beautiful.
And Haim,
of course people love them.
And Haim also kind of did a lot of that stuff themselves.
Yeah.
They weren't an industry-made band. Like, they proved that they could do the whole business.
Mm-hmm. And, there's a million examples of that. Like, I remember seeing Janelle Monáe and her band a few years ago, and, a lot of her band are women, and, like, her bass player, the backup singers are women, and we opened for them and Outkast at the Swedish festival, and I remember I was all emotional talking to them backstage, because it was such a beautiful show, and I was like, do you guys realize that, like, when I was 16, like, we just didn't have this, and seeing you guys up there playing and being so great, and, like, I was totally, like, weepy, and they're like, they weren't alive then, and I'm sure they know. Like, I'm sure they know, but, like, seeing this weepy white lady being like, oh, it's so beautiful, like, yeah, I'm that lady now, but you know what? I'm unapologetically that lady, because I needed that so bad when I was a kid, and so did all the other kids. Like, we were starving.
And you got to starving. We should all remind young people today that their presence is political and their presence is a win.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't really always understand it unless someone older says, yo, bro, we've been to the mountaintop. You should see this.
I know. And having been in the music business for 30 years now, like, the math puts you in the future.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, being, at the Janelle Monáe show or the Haim show, you feel like you're in a portal and you're looking at the future, and the younger you is there with you. And it is really heavy and really emotional. And you're like, the future's fucking amazing. Like, I cannot wait for 30 more years of this compounded progress.
Have you ever been tired from this fight? Not a fight, but, the invasion.
Yeah. It makes me fucking grouchy a lot of the time. But, I don't intend to stop it. And, most of the fighting I do is the fighting of encouraging people rather than fuck youing. But I do a lot of that too.
Gotta be you.
You gotta be you.
How many songs you got kicking around that are ready to go that didn't make this album?
Oh, I'm not prolific. None.
You used them all?
No, I always use them all.
There's no vault?
No.
No?
No.
And in your head, fresh ideas?
I have some fresh ideas, which I'm excited to check out. I also want to write a lot of things, but, it's been a long year since the house burned down, so I kind of need to look after that too. Like,
need a break.
There's a hole in the ground where my house used to be. Kind of got to work on that.
Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
That was a pleasure.
Indeed. Thank you.